We talk about emotional resilience a lot these days. It shows up everywhere in conversations about mental health awareness, in self-improvement content, in mindfulness practices, personal development books, life coaching programs, even relationship advice. Everyone wants to be more resilient, more emotionally intelligent, more grounded, better at coping with stress. But here's the question I don't hear often enough. If emotional resilience is about coping better, why do so many capable, thoughtful, self-aware people still feel overwhelmed, reactive, and exhausted? Why do stress management tools work for a while and then stop altogether? Why do people who practice mindfulness, positive thinking, and self-care still lie awake at night replaying conversations, imagining the worst case scenario, or feeling like they're always one step away from snapping? What I've learned through my own experience is that emotional resilience isn't built by constantly adding more techniques. It's built by removing the internal patterns that quietly drain you every day. So in this video, I wanted to talk about the 5 toxic patterns I had to stop in order to build real emotional resilience. Not surface level coping strategies, not forced positivity, but the kind of resilience that holds up under pressure, responsibility, and in real life. Welcome to the Lead Well channel, where we explore the inner world of leadership, well-being, and what it means to build a business and a life that doesn't break you. Hi, my name's Trevor. I run a multi-award winning hospitality business, and for a long time I thought emotional resilience meant I was coping. I could handle the pressure. I could keep going. I could push through stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. I read the books, I listened to the podcasts, I tried meditation, breathwork, mindfulness, and different forms of self-care. I was interested in personal growth and self-improvement long before I ever spoke about it publicly. And a lot of that helped, but underneath all of it, there were patterns that I didn't realize were making everything harder than it needed to be. Not dramatic, obvious behaviors, but quiet ones, internal ones, the kind that feel normal because you've always done them. It wasn't until I hit moments of real anxiety, panic attacks, and emotional exhaustion that I started questioning whether resilience was really about doing more or whether it was about stopping certain things altogether. Emotional resilience is often framed as strength, being tough, not letting things get to you, bouncing back quickly. But real emotional resilience isn't about being unaffected. It's about how you interpret, respond to, and carry what happens to you. Mental health professionals often talk about emotional regulation, self-awareness, and coping strategies. Life coaching talks about mindset and personal responsibility. Personal development talks about growth and healing. All of these point to the same truth. Your internal patterns determine how heavy life feels. Pressure is unavoidable. Stress happens. Challenges are part of being human. But certain toxic patterns amplify that pressure internally, turning manageable stress into chronic emotional strain. Toxic pattern number 1, negative self-talk. The first pattern I had to confront was negative self-talk. Not obvious, dramatic self-criticism, subtle, constant background noise. The way I spoke to myself when something went wrong, the assumptions I made about my own competence, the stories I told myself about what mistakes meant. What's interesting is that most of us would never speak to someone that we love in the same way that we speak to ourselves. I could be compassionate, calm, and encouraging with staff, friends, or my wife, but internally I was harsh, absolute, and unforgiving. Negative self-talk doesn't feel toxic when you're used to it. It feels like realism, like accountability, but over time it erodes emotional resilience. It collapses perspective. It turns setbacks into personal failures. It keeps your nervous system in a constant state of threat. Once I became aware of it through self-awareness and reflection, I realized that emotional intelligence starts internally. Stopping negative self-talk didn't mean replacing it with fake positive thinking. It meant learning to speak to myself with accuracy and fairness. That shift alone reduced stress more than any productivity hack ever did. The second toxic pattern was skipping over the wins. My wife and I used to joke about this. Something good would happen and I'd say, yeah, but almost immediately. Yes, the service went well, but we need to fix this. Yes, the feedback was great, but next week it will be harder. Yes, that works, but it could have been a bit better. At the time, I thought this was ambition, drive, wanting to improve. What I didn't realize was that my nervous system was only ever receiving negative input. When you constantly skip over those little wins, your brain stays in problem-solving mode. It never gets the signal that things are okay. This has a huge impact on mental health and emotional resilience. You start living in a permanent state of vigilance. Stress never resolves, even success feels flat. Celebrating small wins isn't about ego, it's about updating reality. Once I learned to consciously acknowledge progress, things softened internally. Not because life got easier, but because my internal world became way more balanced. The third toxic pattern is blaming others. This one is uncomfortable, but extremely powerful. Blaming others feels justified. When something goes wrong, it's easy to locate fault externally, circumstances, people, systems. And for a long time, I didn't realize how much power I was giving away by doing this. Blame keeps you emotionally stuck. It breeds bitterness. It narrows your options. When you believe someone else is responsible for how you feel, you hand them control over your emotional state. Taking responsibility is one of the most freeing things that you can do. This doesn't mean self-blame, it means recognizing where you still have agency. When I stopped blaming, my relationships improved, my stress reduced, my emotional resilience increased. Responsibility restored my sense of control. It shifted my mindset from victimhood to choice. And once you reclaim that power, emotional healing becomes possible. Toxic pattern number 4 is reacting in emotion. This was a big one for me. When something happens that triggers fear, frustration, or anger, it's incredibly tempting to react immediately, to send that message or say that thing, to take action before thinking it through. I can't count the number of times I've reacted emotionally and later regretted it. Messages I'd wish I'd waited on, conversations I should have paused, decisions made in the heat of the moment. Emotional reactions feel urgent, but they're rarely wise. Building emotional resilience required learning to pause, to create space between stimulus and response. That pause isn't weakness, it's emotional intelligence in action. Once I learned to wait until my nervous system settled, my decisions improved, my relationships improved, and stress stopped escalating unnecessarily. Toxic pattern number 5 is projecting worst case scenarios. This was the pattern that most affected my sleep. Lying awake at night, running through every possible disaster, imagining outcomes that hadn't happened, trying to solve problems that didn't even exist yet. Worst case thinking feels protective. It feels like preparation, but in reality, it just exhausts you. Your body responds to imagined threats the same way it responds to real ones. Heart rate increases, stress hormones spike, sleep disappears. Through mindfulness, self-awareness, and deliberate mental health practices, I learned to interrupt this pattern. Not by ignoring problems, but by refusing to live outside imaginary futures. And once this stopped, my sleep improved, my stress levels dropped, my emotional resilience strengthened. The turning point for me was realizing that none of these patterns meant I was broken. They were coping strategies, learned behaviors, attempts to stay safe, successful, and in control. But they were amplifying pressure instead of helping me manage it. Emotional resilience didn't come from adding more self-help tools. It came from removing what was draining me. These 5 toxic patterns quietly undermine emotional resilience. Negative self-talk, skipping the wins, the blame, emotional reactivity, and worst-case thinking. Stopping them didn't make life easy. It made it manageable. It improved my mental health. It strengthened my relationships. It supported personal growth and emotional healing. Emotional resilience isn't about being positive all the time. It's about being aware, responsible, and deliberate in how you respond to life. If this resonates with you, let me know in the comments. Which of these patterns do you recognize most in yourself? And if you want to go deeper into building emotional resilience, self-awareness, and leadership under pressure, check out the other videos on my account because I go through everything in much more detail there. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like and a subscribe. It helps me, it helps the channel, and it helps people like us find the content that really matters. And as always, I'd love to remind you that you matter too. Don't forget that.